Greetings to you all. This is Zonta Advocacy Training Module 101, Introduction to Zonta Advocacy. It is part of a series of training modules for Zontans about advocacy. In this module, we are going to address what do we mean by Zonta advocacy? What is the difference between Zonta advocacy and Zonta service? What are the goals and strategy of Zonta advocacy? What are the 4 focus areas, the 4 shared moments of activism, and the 4 new initiatives for Zonta advocacy in the 2024-26 biennium? What does it mean that Zonta is non-partisan and non-sectarian, and how does that affect Zonta advocacy? So what do we mean by Zonta advocacy? We recognise that the word advocacy may mean different things in different languages. The words on this slide are actually taken direct from Zonta International's policy on advocacy. You'll find that policy on the Advocacy Tools page on the Zonta International website. Let's break this down. Advocacy is the expression of support for or opposition to a cause, argument, or proposal. So first, and importantly, advocacy is not only about opposing a proposition, it may also include backing or boosting a cause or an initiative that you support. Advocacy may include influencing laws, legislation, or attitudes. So the laws and legislation part is perhaps more easily understood. For example, we may make submissions on new laws or legislation to bring about change. But as well as changing laws and legislation, advocacy is also a lot about changing attitudes. Raising awareness about violence against women through the Zonta Says No campaign is an example of that. And importantly, while we can be visible through our bold use of the colour orange, to advocate, we need to ensure that our messages are understood. This is so that we can influence attitudes about and help bring an end to gender-based violence. Another example of advocacy, this one at the international level, is the open letter that International President Sala wrote to thank Giselle Palago of France, the woman who was raped by more than 50 men, all orchestrated by her then husband over a span of 10 years. President Sala letter is a letter of support which thanked Giselle for her bravery in speaking up against gender-based violence, rape, and sexual assault. And if you're looking for that letter, you'll find it on the Zonta International website under News. So our advocacy can take many forms, and of course, fundamentally, it relates to using our voices to advance the status of women and girls and their human rights, or in other words, building a better world for women and girls. What is the difference between Zonta advocacy and Zonta service? We have already seen that Zonta International's policy on advocacy says that advocacy is the expression of support for or opposition to a cause, argument, or proposal. Advocacy may include influencing laws, legislation, or attitudes. On the other hand, Zonta service can be described in this way. A service project is an activity carried out by Zonta members in which they participate actively and personally in organising support for women and girls in need and giving hands-on assistance. An example of service might be the work that you do as part of the service project selected by your district or club, which focuses on Zonta's mission. For example, your club might support a shelter for women who have been subject to gender-based violence. You might, for instance, bring items of furniture and clothing to support the shelter. That work would be part of service. But at the same time, your club might also be participating in a Zonta Says No campaign to raise awareness in your community about the need to eliminate gender-based violence. That is advocacy. You might also be making a submission to the government to change a law that may help eliminate violence against women in your country. That is also advocacy. The challenges facing women and girls globally are vast and complex. The work we do is based on the goals and strategy that the Zonta International Board has set and which apply for the biennium. You'll find the goals and strategy on the Zonta International website. In relation to advocacy, in the 2024-26 biennium, there are 4 focus areas for advocacy, 4 shared moments of activism, and 4 new initiatives. Details are set out in the Advocacy Simple Guide for Clubs, which can be found under Advocacy Tools on the Zonta International website. So let's take a look at the 4 focus areas. This is the focus of Zonta advocacy at international, district, and club levels. Eliminating violence against women. The Zonta Says No to Violence Against Women campaign is the platform throughout the year for Zontians to speak up to promote the human rights of women and girls and end gender-based violence. This campaign is highlighted during the 16 days of activism between 25 November and 10 December. But importantly, the Zonta Says No campaign isn't just on the 16 days of activism. It's a year-round campaign. Climate justice. This is where Zonta Says Now comes in. The Zonta Says Now to Gender Equal Climate Action campaign focuses on how climate change is increasing gender inequality. This campaign advocates to end the gender-related consequences of climate change. Women in decision-making. Zonta advocates for women to have a seat at the decision-making tables. This is to ensure that women's voices are heard on local, national, and international issues affecting their lives, livelihoods, and the environment. Education equality. Zonta advocates for the right of every girl to education. Importantly, our work to end child marriage improves access to education for girls. So these are the 4 areas where Zonta is focusing our advocacy efforts this 2024-26 biennium. These 4 focus areas are interrelated. Zonta stays relevant, focused, and is seen and heard as an influential force for gender equity globally. This is supported with globally aligned and shared moments of activism on an annual basis. So here are the 4 moments of activism. International Women's Day, Zonta Rose Day, both on 8 March. This is the day to promote gender equality and advocate for women in decision-making positions. On this day internationally, we emphasise Zonta's commitments and activity in the United Nations, including the Commission on the Status of Women and in the Council of Europe. The yellow rose, which is so significant for Zonta and our symbol for Rose Day on 8 March, also had significance for the suffragists. I'm going to take a minute to tell you about that. This piece of history comes out of the USA. In 1920, suffragists and those who opposed the suffragists' cause met in Nashville, Tennessee, to lobby the state legislature for and against ratifying the 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution. That amendment was related to the right of the women in the United States to vote. Anyway, arguments on both sides were intense. Tennessee was poised to either be the needed 36th state to ratify the amendment or to reject ratification and ensure the fight continued. So it turns out that both sides wore rose-shaped pins to indicate which side of the battle they were on, and the suffragists wore yellow roses. The Tennessee General Assembly passed the 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution on August 18, 1920. Tennessee provided the 36th and final state needed to ratify the constitutional amendment. And that's how women got the vote in the United States, thanks to the suffragists who wore the yellow rose pins. That little piece of history adds another dimension to our Zonta yellow rose. Moving on, the next moment of activism in the year is Earth Day, 22 April. This is the day for actions for climate justice and highlighting the work of Zonta Says Now. Then we have International Day of the Girl Child, 11 October. This is an international day declared by the United Nations. On this day, we emphasize education equality and the elimination of child marriage. And finally, the 16 days of activism. The campaign runs from November 25th, the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, to December 10th, Human Rights Day. This is the time for focusing on the Zonta Says No to Violence Against Women campaign. There are 4 new initiatives to support our advocacy in the 2024-26 biennium. These initiatives provide information and training and help improve the way we organise ourselves to advocate. Firstly, the Zonta Virtual Advocacy Series. Each quarter, there is a speaker or speakers on advocacy topics linked to one or more of the 4 focus areas. So far this series, we have had a webinar on ending child marriage, a webinar taking a closer look at Zonta Says Now, and a webinar placing a spotlight on Zonta Says No. You'll find the recordings to these Zonta Advocacy Series webinars on the Advocacy Tools page. You can find information about upcoming advocacy webinars and other Zonta International advocacy events on the Events tab on the Zonta International website. Secondly, the Zonta podcast. Remarkable Women, Powerful Stories is a podcast on Spotify, and you can also listen to it on YouTube. This podcast concentrates on the 4 focus areas which were described earlier. You can easily find all the previous editions of this podcast, including on the Zonta International website. Zonta Advocacy Training Program. An advocacy training program for Zontians is being developed. The training session that you are watching now is the first in the series of modules covering a range of advocacy-related topics for this program. And finally, we're looking at creating new Zonta caucuses, unions, and alliances to facilitate advocacy at the national or country level. So to explain this, in some countries, for example, New Zealand, the whole country is one district. In New Zealand's case, District 16. But there are some countries in Zonta whose boundaries do not align with district boundaries. For example, the USA contains 13 districts, and we have the USA Caucus, which covers advocacy for all of the USA at the national level. And then again, a country like Germany is part of 5 districts because of where the district boundaries fall. And the German Union covers advocacy for all of Germany at the national level. Another example is Zonta Australia, which was formed at the Brisbane Convention in 2024. So even though Australia is made up of 3 districts, Zonta Australia advocates for the whole of Australia at the national level. Work is being done to assist in facilitating collaboration between these country groups, the caucuses, alliances, and unions. We are also exploring opportunities to form new caucuses, alliances, and unions where such groups do not already exist. The last matter we're going to address briefly is, what does it mean that Zonta is non-partisan and non-sectarian? Zonta International, its districts and its clubs are non-partisan and non-sectarian. This means that Zonta does not advocate on behalf of or endorse a partisan candidate, a political party, any special interest group, or any religion or religious denomination. However, Zonta does advocate in the public interest and for the greater good with respect to advancing Zonta's mission to build a better world for women and girls. And to be clear, in advancing this mission, Zonta's advocacy is a political action. In simple terms, Zonta members can advocate about issues related to Zonta's mission, and that is a political action. But we do not support or endorse a political party, a political candidate, a special interest group, or any religion or religious denomination. You can find more information about this and other topics covered in this module on the Advocacy Tools page on the Zonta International website. In particular, the Advocacy Definition and Policy document on that page is a useful starting point. So that is our introduction to Zonta advocacy. For more information, take a look at the other modules that we are developing for this training series. The next module will explore the framework for Zonta advocacy, or in other words, how we organise ourselves at international, district, country, area, and club level to do our Zonta advocacy work. Thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of your day.